Just above this road was a really cool painting spot. It had a cool view of this reservoir. I wasn't here for long, but in this video I'll show you what I saw and how I went about painting it. It obviously wasn't a long hike to get to this perch, but I find that even walking a small distance from the car can be the difference between a so-so view and a great one. I try to pack light for these outdoor sessions, and this time I brought my stool and a small tripod table. That makes it easy to place my box full of pencils on it, and I kept my canvas small this time. Canvas is the wrong word. It's a small piece, 4" by 5" of thicker artboard that I pre-primed with some acrylic spray paint. More about that in a minute. Sketching or painting on a small surface like this is ideal because sometimes I need to keep my outdoor sessions short, because while it would be nice to spend hours outdoors painting, I don't often have that luxury. I'm probably like you in that I have a full-time regular job, and it's not easy to find the time. So today I'm just out here to practice a little bit. I'm using watercolor pencils on this surface, and I've learned that watercolor pencils work a little bit better for me on a less absorbent surface. That's why I spray painted it with acrylic paint. I often cut down my larger artboards to small ones, so I'm less afraid to practice on them, because after all it's just a small piece. It's less pressure that way. The acrylic primed surface really helps the water-soluble pencil pigment spread nicely. Yeah, these pencils work fine on normal watercolor paper too, but you'll see in a bit that there's an extra advantage to painting on top of a pre-primed paper artboard. One advantage to using a thicker artboard is it won't buckle like paper would after adding the water. I like that. This is a cool looking place, and as I mentioned, I won't be here for long. I drove quite a ways to get here, so I couldn't stay long before I had to head back home. But I was here long enough to capture the feel of the place, and it was enjoyable to take the time to do more than just take a photograph. I like photography, but you notice more things when you sit and paint or sketch a bit. I enjoyed people watching too, as much as drawing, and since this was early May, it was nice to finally get some warmer weather after a long winter. So it was really nice to sit and paint for a bit. I'm glad I kept things simple, and these watercolor pencils are a great way to capture things really quickly. It is the perfect combination of sketching, drawing, and painting. I like that I can draw with the pencil, and then by just adding a little bit of water, it turns into a nice painterly look. This is truly just a quick study of the place. I tried to capture the darks and the lights and the vibrant colors that sometimes a photograph doesn't convey. It isn't a perfect rendition of what I'm seeing, but I feel like it does catch the feeling of the place. That said, I do take pictures and some final reference shots because I'll be adding to this painting once I get home, and I'll also recap a little bit of what I learned. Now that I'm home, I decided to add some people to the scene because I've never seen that particular place empty, and it's also more drawing practice. I'm usually pretty hesitant to draw people, and I wasn't sure how big to make the rafts and the paddleboarder, but I was inspired by this vintage art book that I picked up at a used store recently. The author makes the case that sometimes adding a few figures can give life to a painting, or at least give the viewer a sense of scale. I liked how he approached it, and I think he's right. The figures don't have to be overly detailed either, especially on this small of a canvas. It's just a hint of people, and it really does help establish how big the reservoir is. So I'm going to add that paddleboarder and the folks in the raft we saw. Plus, now that I have some more time at home, I'll be changing some other things I didn't quite like about this painting. Did I already mention that I just view all this as practice? For example, I'm still not certain of the scale of the people, but I'm giving it a go anyway. This surface is really forgiving, and it's easy to fix mistakes. So while I'm trying to be careful and do a good job, I'm not overly worried about it, because I can always erase what I don't like. That's the number one thing I like about the acrylic I sprayed on the paper before I started. That pencil can pretty much wipe right off. You can't do that with normal paper. Once I started adding people in the water, I realized I had the reservoir too small, so I'm making it a little bit bigger. I'm also going to darken things up a bit. This first layer was good for getting the perspectives worked out, but now I think I need to darken it up a little. It was a pretty greenish teal color, and this might be a little bit bright of a teal, but I can blend a warmer yellow over it in a minute. I'm just trying to get a darker value to the water than I had before. I liked how I did the figures, but I'm kind of have to salvage what I can of it and paint up close to them. And I can always fix what I mess up here, so that's good. This brush is actually wet, but it's not very wet, and that's why you can see the bristles spread a little bit. There's barely a little bit of water on this, because you don't need much water with watercolor pencils, especially on this surface. They spread really nicely with just a little bit of water on the brush. I'm blending it as much as I can, and I'll fiddle with it quite a bit before adding some darker colors to the mountains. The mountains were much greener and darker and tanner than I had, but for atmospheric perspective, I'm keeping them a little bit cooler blue. That's why I'm making the shadows more purplish, because it'll be an attempt to push them back a little bit to make them look like they're in the distance. This is a yellow ochre, which will add some greenish vibe to it. But I'm mixing, and this yellow and the blue, that's going to blend to be a little bit gray, which is not a bad thing for a distant mountain. It's always interesting to see what color overpowers the other color, and this green ochre is pretty strong. It's kind of fun to let the pigment do what it does, even though I have a feeling of what it'll do based on the practice I've had. It always is kind of a surprise of what color I'm getting. So since that was a little bit more yellowish than I wanted, I'm going to keep adding some cooler violet to these mountains to see if I can get them to be a little more gray. And I'm also going to darken these trees because they do go up in the mountain and into the distance. So it's fun to kind of do some impressionistic marks to make these trees stand out and be a little bit more a part of the painting. Plus I decided to darken up some of the shadows of those trees so they would be a little bit darker and stand out a little bit better. Using watercolor pencils is a quick and easy way to sketch and paint with zero mess. A smaller surface is less intimidating and quicker to finish. Priming it with acrylic was a great way to make it have a more painterly look and also help recover from mistakes. So that was really nice. Kind of a final part was to try to recover some of the figure that I painted over when I first did it. This electric eraser allowed me to do some really precise eraser marks for the paddleboard and the rafts. And that's kind of a cool technique again with this surface. You just can't do this with the normal paper. And it was nice to just keep this small and do a small practice. It was a fun trip out into the mountains, and it was fun to do a lot of this experimentation. If you want some tips on how I made that portable art box that doubles as an easel, check out this video here. As always, thanks for exploring art with me.